Welcome to Midnight Mysteries. Tonight, we journey to the ancient spires of Cambridge, where autumn mist curls through medieval courtyards and shadows gather beneath the clock tower that has marked the hours for 4 centuries. It is October 1929, and Hercule Poirot receives a most unusual summons, one that will draw him into a world of academic intrigue, buried secrets, and a murder timed to the very stroke of midnight. Join us for The Clocktower Murder, a tale of ambition, betrayal, and the sins we bury in youth that return to haunt us in age. This mystery is crafted in homage to the masterful Agatha Christie, whose genius we honor, though this enigma unfolds on our own terms. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed halls of learning. Now, as the fog rolls across the backs and the great clock prepares to chime, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Cambridge. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, its envelope bearing the unmistakable crest of St. Ambrose's College, Cambridge. I watched as Poirot turned it over in his small, neat hands, his keen eyes examining the wax seal before he so much as considered opening it. "You recognize the crest, Hastings?" he inquired, one eyebrow raised with that characteristic precision. "Cambridge, certainly," I replied, setting down my newspaper. "One of the colleges, can't say which." "St. Ambrose's," Poirot murmured, slitting the envelope with a silver letter opener. "One of the smaller foundations, yet distinguished. Founded in 1412, if my memory does not deceive me, and it so rarely does." I suppressed a smile. Poirot's memory was indeed formidable, as was his willingness to remind one of the fact. His eyes moved across the letter's contents, and I observed a subtle shift in his expression. Interest kindling where moments before there had been only the mild curiosity of a man disturbed during his morning routine. "It is from Dr. Julian Cavendish," Poirot announced, "a fellow of the college, and a man with whom I crossed paths some years ago in connection with a small matter involving a stolen Byzantine manuscript. He writes with some urgency." "What does he want?" Poirot read aloud, his accent lending the English words a certain musical quality. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, I find myself in the uncomfortable position of fearing a tragedy before it occurs. The atmosphere at St. Ambrose's has become poisonous, and I use that word advisedly. One of our number, Professor Edmund Ashworth, has made enemies of nearly every fellow in the senior common room. Threats have been made. Tempers have flared. I fear that unless someone of your remarkable abilities intervenes, blood will be spilled before the Michaelmas term concludes. I implore you to visit us, under any pretense you choose. Your presence may prevent a catastrophe." I leaned forward. "Sounds rather melodramatic for academics, doesn't it? Surely university dons don't go about murdering each other." Poirot folded the letter with care. "You underestimate, mon ami, the passions that simmer beneath the surface of the scholarly life. Ambition, jealousy, the theft of ideas, these are not trifling matters to those whose entire existence revolves around reputation and intellectual legacy. The university, it is a hothouse, and in a hothouse, even the smallest flame can cause devastation." He rose from his chair, his grey cells already engaged with the problem. "We shall go to Cambridge, Hastings. The little grey cells, they sense something of interest here. Besides," he smoothed his immaculate waistcoat, "I have always found the architecture of the English universities to be most pleasing in its symmetry." We arrived at Cambridge late the following afternoon, the train depositing us at the station just as the autumn sun began its descent toward the flat fenland horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the first true chill of October, and a light mist was already gathering along the River Cam as our taxi conveyed us towards St. Ambrose's College. The college itself was smaller than its more famous neighbours, tucked away on a quiet lane behind the grander edifices of Trinity and St. John's. Yet what it lacked in size, it compensated for in antiquity and atmosphere. The gatehouse was pure medieval, its honey-coloured stone darkened by centuries of English weather, and above it rose the famous Clocktower, a slender Gothic spire that dominated the modest skyline of the college. The Ashworth Tower, they call it now, our driver remarked, noting my upward gaze. Named for the family that restored it 50 years back. Same family as the professor, as it happens. Indeed. Poirot's interest sharpened. Professor Ashworth's family funded the restoration? That's right, sir. The Ashworths have been connected to St. Ambrose's for generations. The professor, he's the last of them. No children, they say. When he goes, the money goes elsewhere. Poirot filed this information away with a small nod, and I could see the little grey cells beginning their work. We passed through the gatehouse into Great Court, a quadrangle of perfect proportions, surrounded by medieval buildings. The clock tower rose from the far corner, its face showing 4:30, and even as I watched, the mechanism stirred and chimed the half-hour with a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. Every quarter hour, came a voice behind us. It's driven undergraduates to madness and fellows to drink since the 15th century. We turned to find a tall, spare man in academic robes approaching us across the cobblestones. His face was lined but kindly, with the distracted air of someone whose mind perpetually dwelt on matters more elevated than the mundane. Dr. Cavendish, I presume? Poirot extended his hand. Monsieur Poirot, thank God you've come. Cavendish's handshake was firm but brief, his eyes darting about the courtyard as though fearful of being observed. And this is Captain Hastings? I've read of your partnership. Please come to my rooms. We can speak privately there. He led us through a low doorway and up a winding stone staircase to a comfortable set of rooms overlooking the court. Books lined every wall, and a fire crackled in the grate against the autumn chill. Cavendish gestured us to chairs and poured sherry with slightly unsteady hands. I must apologize for the melodrama of my letter, he began, settling into his own chair. But I assure you, my fears are not unfounded. The situation here has become intolerable. Tell me of this Professor Ashworth, Poirot said, accepting his sherry but not drinking. Cavendish's expression darkened. Edmund Ashworth is, how shall I put this, a brilliant man who has allowed brilliance to curdle into cruelty. He holds the chair of classical history, a position his family's money secured for him 30 years ago. In that time, he has made himself indispensable to the college through continued benefactions, while simultaneously making himself despised through his treatment of colleagues. In what way? He destroys careers, Monsieur Poirot. If a younger scholar shows promise that might eclipse his own reputation, Ashworth finds ways to undermine them. He blocks promotions, he sabotages publications, he spreads whispers about personal conduct. Cavendish's voice grew bitter. I have watched 3 promising academics leave Cambridge in disgrace because of Edmund Ashworth's machinations. And no one has confronted him? Who would dare? His family money supports half the scholarships at St. Ambrose's. The master, Sir Reginald Blackwood, is entirely in his pocket. To move against Ashworth is to commit professional suicide. Poirot steepled his fingers. You mentioned threats in your letter. Cavendish nodded gravely. A week ago, in the senior common room, Dr. Marcus Webb, a lecturer in medieval history whom Ashworth has been systematically blocking from a fellowship, stood up and declared, in front of a dozen witnesses, that he would see Ashworth dead before Christmas. It was the sherry talking, perhaps, but the venom in his voice. He shuddered. I believed him capable of it, Monsieur Poirot. I truly did. And yet Dr. Webb is not the only one with grievance. Far from it. Professor Harold Finch owes Ashworth money. Gambling debts, I believe, and lives in terror of exposure. Dr. Helena Crane, a brilliant young archaeologist, has seen her research systematically undermined since she refused Ashworth's advances. Cavendish coloured slightly. Even Lady Blackwood, the master's wife, despises him for reasons I have never understood. The list goes on. I glanced at Poirot, whose face betrayed nothing. "This Professor Ashworth," he said quietly. "He is aware of the hostility he engenders?" "Aware?" Cavendish gave a hollow laugh. "He revels in it. Power without opposition bores him. He enjoys watching others squirm. And tonight? Where might one find this Professor Ashworth? Tonight is the Michaelmas feast, the formal dinner marking the start of term. All fellows will attend. Ashworth has already announced he will make a significant announcement regarding the college's future. Given his fondness for cruelty, I suspect he intends to humiliate someone publicly." Cavendish's hands tightened on his sherry glass. "It may be the sparkle that ignites the powder keg, Monsieur Poirot." "Then we shall attend this feast," Poirot declared, rising from his chair. "You have secured our invitation. You are my guests. Rooms have been prepared in the guest wing." Cavendish hesitated. "But Monsieur Poirot, I must ask, what is your pretense for being here? Ashworth will be suspicious of a famous detective appearing on the eve of his announcement." Poirot smiled. That small, enigmatic smile I knew so well. "I am an admirer of medieval architecture, Dr. Cavendish, visiting Cambridge to study the clock tower of St. Ambrose's College, a structure of particular symmetry that has long fascinated me." He adjusted his already perfect tie. "It is even, perhaps, true. We dined that evening in the Great Hall, a magnificent medieval chamber with a hammer-beam roof and portraits of benefactors glowering down from panelled walls. The high table stretched across one end, candles flickering in silver candelabras, while the fellows of St. Ambrose's took their places with the ritualistic precision of centuries of tradition. I observed them all, as Poirot had taught me to do, noting each face and filing away first impressions. Sir Reginald Blackwood, the master, presided from the centre of the table, a portly man with the florid complexion of one too fond of port, his manner genial, but his eyes calculating. Beside him sat Lady Catherine Blackwood, perhaps 20 years his junior, elegant and cold, her gaze lingering on her husband's colleagues with something I could not quite read. Professor Edmund Ashworth occupied a place of honour near the master's right hand. He was a tall man, running to fat, with silver hair swept back from a high forehead, and eyes that held a peculiar brightness. Intelligent, yes, but touched with something unpleasant. His smile, as he surveyed his colleagues, held the satisfaction of a cat among mice. Dr. Marcus Webb sat further down the table, a handsome man of 40 with dark hair silvering at the temples. His jaw was tight, and I noticed he refused to meet Ashworth's gaze. Beside him, Professor Harold Finch, elderly, nervous, perpetually dabbing at his forehead with a handkerchief, seemed to shrink whenever Ashworth glanced in his direction. And then there was Dr. Helena Crane. She was younger than the others, perhaps 35, with auburn hair pinned simply and features that were striking rather than beautiful. There was strength in her face, determination, but also, I thought, exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone, fighting a battle they knew they could not win. When her eyes met Ashworth's, I saw no fear there, only a cold, settled hatred. "The lady archaeologist," Poirot murmured beside me. "She interests you, Hastings?" "She looks as though she's contemplating murder," I admitted, "as do several others at this table. That, mon ami, is precisely what concerns me." The dinner proceeded with the formal rituals of academic tradition. Latin grace, multiple courses, the passing of decanters in prescribed directions. As the evening progressed and wine flowed, conversations grew louder, less guarded. Then Professor Ashworth rose to speak. The table fell silent immediately. Even the servants paused in their duties. Ashworth surveyed the assembly with that unpleasant smile, and I felt Poirot tense beside me. "My dear colleagues," Ashworth began, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "As you know, the Ashworth family has supported St. Ambrose's for generations. It has been my privilege to continue that tradition. However, the time has come for certain adjustments. He paused, savoring the attention. I have decided, he continued, to revise the terms of my benefaction. Henceforth, funding for certain research positions will be contingent upon my personal approval of the scholar in question. Those who have demonstrated disloyalty to the college, or to me personally, will find their support withdrawn. His gaze swept the table, resting briefly on Dr. Webb, on Dr. Crane, on Professor Finch. Each in turn went pale. Furthermore, I shall be recommending to the master that certain junior appointments be reconsidered. Dead wood must be cleared if the college is to flourish. Dr. Webb's chair scraped back, but Lady Blackwood's hand on his arm restrained him. Dr. Crane's expression did not change, but her knuckles whitened around her dessert fork. This is monstrous, someone muttered. Professor Finch, I thought. Ashworth merely smiled. Progress often seems monstrous to those who fear change. Good evening. He sat down to absolute silence. Beside me, Poirot's little grey cells were working furiously. It begins, Hastings, he murmured. The powder keg. It has been lit. Now, we wait for the explosion. Chapter 2. Death at the Stroke of Midnight. The remainder of the evening passed in strained silence. The fellows dispersed from the hall in small groups, their whispered conversations dying whenever Ashworth passed near. I observed Dr. Webb slip away early, his face thunderous, while Dr. Crane lingered by the portrait of some long-dead benefactor, her expression unreadable. Poirot and I retired to our guest rooms shortly after 10 o'clock. The accommodations were comfortable, ancient oak panelling, mullioned windows overlooking Great Court, and beds that had likely hosted visitors since the Restoration. The clock tower was visible from my window, its illuminated face showing the hour with silent authority. What do you make of it, Poirot? I asked, joining him in his sitting room where a fire had been laid. Poirot stood at the window, his silhouette framed against the moonlit court below. I make of it, Hastings, that Dr. Cavendish was entirely correct to summon me. This Professor Ashworth, he is a man who manufactures enemies as other men manufacture goods. He does so deliberately, with calculation. Such a man is not merely disliked. He is dangerous. Dangerous? Surely he's the one in danger. Précisément. Poirot turned from the window. But consider, mon ami, a man who provokes others to violence, who delights in their helpless rage, such a man believes himself untouchable. This belief, it is itself a form of aggression. He attacks, knowing his victims cannot strike back without destroying themselves, until someone decides they have nothing left to lose. You understand perfectly. Poirot settled into an armchair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Tonight, at that dinner, Professor Ashworth pushed several people to that precipice. Dr. Webb, who has already made public threats. Dr. Crane, whose career he threatens to destroy utterly. Professor Finch, who owes him money and lives in terror of exposure. Even Lady Blackwood, whose hostility toward him was palpable, though its source remains obscure. You think one of them will act? I think one of them may already have decided to act, and was merely waiting for justification. His eyes gleamed in the firelight. The announcement tonight provided that justification most abundantly. I shivered, though the room was warm. Then, shouldn't we warn someone? The master, perhaps, or the police. Warn them of what, Hastings? That academic colleagues dislike each other? That a wealthy man has made enemies through his arrogance? Poirot shook his head. No. We watch. We wait. And we hope that Hercule Poirot's presence alone may be sufficient to prevent tragedy. I went to bed uneasy, the ancient walls of the college pressing close around me. Outside my window, the clock tower chimed 11, then past, each resonant note marking the slow passage of the night. I drifted into fitful sleep, dreaming of shadowed courtyards and figures moving through mist. The sound that woke me was not the clock. It was a scream. I was on my feet before conscious thought caught up with instinct, groping for my dressing gown in the darkness. The scream had come from outside, from the court below. As I threw open my window, the clock tower began to chime midnight, its 12 solemn notes rolling across the silent college. In the moonlight, I could see a figure standing at the base of the tower, arms raised, the source of that terrible cry. Other windows were lighting now, faces appearing, voices calling out in confusion and alarm. Poirot's door opened behind me. He was already dressed. Had he slept at all? His expression grave. Come, Hastings. I fear Dr. Cavendish's prediction has come to pass. We descended the worn stone stairs and emerged into great court. A small crowd was gathering at the clock tower's base, their breath misting in the cold October air. The night porter, a grizzled man in his 60s, was attempting to hold people back, while simultaneously bellowing for someone to telephone the police. "Let me through, please." Poirot's quiet authority parted the crowd more effectively than shouting. "I am Hercule Poirot. I have some experience in these matters." The porter, Hartley I would later learn, nodded grimly and stepped aside. Professor Edmund Ashworth lay on the cobblestones at the base of the clock tower, his evening clothes still immaculate save for the dark stain spreading beneath his shattered skull. His eyes stared upward at the tower from which he had fallen, fixed forever in an expression of profound surprise. The person who had screamed was Dr. Helena Crane. She stood a few feet from the body, her hand pressed to her mouth, her face pale as marble in the moonlight. She wore a dark coat over what appeared to be a nightgown, and her auburn hair hung loose about her shoulders. "Dr. Crane." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "You discovered the body?" She nodded, unable to speak. "What brought you to the court at this hour?" Her voice emerged as a whisper. "I couldn't sleep. After the dinner, after what he said, I walked. I often walk when I cannot sleep. And then I saw—" She gestured helplessly at the broken figure on the stones. Poirot's eyes moved from her to the tower, calculating distances and angles. The clock tower rose perhaps 80 feet above us, its Gothic spire silhouetted against the stars. At its base, a small door provided access to the interior staircase. "The door," Poirot said. "It is locked." Hartley the porter stepped forward. "Always locked after 10 o'clock, sir. College regulation. Only fellows have keys." "And Professor Ashworth?" "Had his own key, sir. Family privilege, you might say, given the tower bears their name." Poirot knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb anything. His quick eyes noted details I could not perceive, the position of the limbs, the angle of the head, the state of the clothing. "He fell from high up," Poirot murmured. "From the observation gallery, I would surmise. The balcony that circles the tower below the clock mechanism. Hastings, observe the hands." I looked. Ashworth's hands were unmarked, the fingernails clean. "No defensive wounds," I said. "No signs of a struggle. Précisément. Either he did not see his attacker, or—" Poirot paused, his head tilting. "Or there was no struggle because there was no attack. The question becomes, did Professor Ashworth fall, or was he pushed?" "Pushed, surely," came a new voice. Dr. Marcus Webb had arrived, hastily dressed, his face flushed. Behind him came Sir Reginald Blackwood, in a magnificent brocade dressing gown, Lady Blackwood pale and silent at his side, and Professor Finch, trembling so violently he could barely stand. "Someone finally did what we all dreamed of," Webb continued, his voice carrying a savage satisfaction that he made no attempt to hide. "The bastard got what he deserved." "Marcus!" Lady Blackwood's sharp rebuke cut through the night air. "For God's sake! Why should I pretend grief I don't feel?" Webb's eyes were wild. "He was destroying all of us, picking us off one by one. Well, now someone stopped him. Dr. Webb." Poirot's voice was soft, but it silenced the man instantly. "Earlier this week, you declared publicly that you would see Professor Ashworth dead before Christmas. Tonight, he is dead. I would advise you to exercise considerable caution in your statements. Webb paled. The savage satisfaction drained from his face, replaced by something very like fear. I didn't. I was angry. I didn't mean. Nevertheless. Poirot turned to the master. Sir Reginald, the police must be summoned immediately. Until they arrive, no one should leave the college, and this area must be preserved exactly as it is. Sir Reginald nodded, his genial face grey with shock. Yes. Yes, of course. Hartley, telephone the police at once, and wake the kitchen staff. We'll need coffee, I should think. It's going to be a long night. As the crowd began to disperse under Poirot's quiet direction, I noticed Dr. Crane still standing motionless, staring at the body. Her earlier shock seemed to have passed, replaced by something I could not identify. Not grief, certainly. Not satisfaction either, as with Webb. Something closer to resignation. The police arrived within the hour. Inspector Graves of the Cambridge Constabulary, a solid, methodical man who clearly resented the presence of a famous Belgian detective at his crime scene, but was too professional to say so directly. Accident, suicide, or murder, Graves pronounced, surveying the scene. Those are the options. And given what I'm hearing about this Professor Ashworth, I know which one my money's on. You have interviewed the witnesses? Poirot inquired. Getting statements now. Dr. Crane found the body at midnight. The porter confirms the tower door was locked at 10 and hadn't been unlocked using the main key. But any fellow could have used their personal key. How many fellows possess such keys? Graves consulted his notebook. 7. Plus Ashworth himself made 8. Sir Reginald Blackwood, Dr. Cavendish, Professor Finch, Dr. Webb, Dr. Crane, Professor Morrison, who's currently in London, and Dr. Patterson, who's elderly and bedridden. So 5 fellows with keys were present in college tonight. 6, counting the victim. That's right, and every one of them had reason to want Ashworth dead, from what I'm hearing. Poirot's moustache twitched. A surfeit of suspects. How inconvenient for you, Inspector. Inconvenient for someone, Graves muttered. I'll want to interview everyone formally in the morning. For now, I'm treating this as suspicious death. No one leaves Cambridge without my permission. As the inspector moved away to direct his constables, Poirot drew me aside. Hastings, while the police occupy themselves with statements and procedures, we shall conduct our own investigation. Tonight? The night. It is when secrets emerge. During the day, people compose themselves, prepare their masks, but now, in these small hours when death is fresh, now they are vulnerable. He glanced toward the tower. First, I wish to examine the scene of the crime itself. Come. The tower door stood open now, a constable guarding it. At Poirot's request, and with Inspector Graves's reluctant permission, we were allowed to ascend. The spiral staircase was narrow and steep, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Poirot climbed slowly, one hand on the central pillar, his eyes examining every surface. There, he said suddenly, pausing 2/3 of the way up. You see, Hastings? I peered at the stone step he indicated. A faint scuff mark, perhaps. Darker than the surrounding surface. Dirt? Mud? Perhaps. Poirot produced a small envelope from his pocket and carefully scraped a sample of the substance onto it. We shall see. We continued to the observation gallery, an open balcony that circled the tower just below the clock mechanism. The view was magnificent. The spires of Cambridge spread out below us in the moonlight. The Cam a silver ribbon in the distance. But my eyes were drawn to the low stone balustrade that ringed the gallery. Waist height on a tall man, I observed. It wouldn't be difficult to push someone over. No, Poirot agreed. Not difficult at all, if one could lure him here. Why would Ashworth come to the tower at midnight? Poirot pointed to the stone floor. Near the balustrade, barely visible in the dim light, lay a scrap of paper. He retrieved it with his handkerchief, holding it up to catch the moonlight. The note was typed, brief, unsigned. Professor Ashworth, I know what happened in France, 1917. The Tower, midnight, come alone, or everyone will know. I read it twice, my mind racing. Blackmail? So it would appear. Poirot's expression was thoughtful. Professor Ashworth received this note and came to the tower at midnight, expecting to meet his blackmailer. Instead, he met his murderer. The same person? Perhaps. Or perhaps the murderer knew about the blackmail and used it to lure the victim to his death. Poirot tucked the note carefully away. The question now becomes, what happened in France in 1917 that someone could use as leverage against a man like Edmund Ashworth? I thought of the Great War, of all the terrible secrets it had spawned. Cowardice, desertion, actions taken in the chaos of battle that men would do anything to hide. He would have been, what, 40 in 1917? Old enough to serve, certainly. Indeed. And yet Professor Ashworth, according to college records, spent the war years in Cambridge, continuing his academic work. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting, is it not, that a man of military age should have remained safely at home while others died in the trenches? Perhaps he was medically unfit. Perhaps. But Poirot's tone suggested he considered other possibilities more likely. We descended the tower in silence, my mind churning with questions. At the base, Dr. Crane still lingered, watching the constables work with that same expression of resigned acceptance. Poirot approached her gently. Dr. Crane, a moment of your time, if you please. She turned to face us, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. Yes, Monsieur Poirot? You served in the war, I believe. As a nurse? Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or wariness. Yes. In France, from 1916 to 1918. How did you know? The way you looked at the body. Poirot's voice was soft, without flinching, without horror. You have seen violent death before, and more than once. One sees a great deal of death in a field hospital, Monsieur Poirot. Her voice was steady. It teaches you that the living require more attention than the dead. And yet you remained by the body when others fled. Professional habit. She met his gaze without wavering. Is there something specific you wish to ask me? Yes. Poirot tilted his head. Did you know Professor Ashworth during the war? The question hung in the cold night air. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something shift behind her eyes. Then, the mask was back in place. No, Monsieur Poirot, I did not. I treated hundreds of men in those years. I cannot recall them all. She pulled her coat tighter. Now, if you'll excuse me, the night is cold, and I have told the police everything I know. Good night. She walked away across the moonlit court, her shadow stretching long behind her. She's lying, Hastings, Poirot murmured. How can you be certain? Because when I mentioned the war, she knew precisely what I was asking. She prepared her answer before the question was complete. He watched her disappear through a doorway. Dr. Helena Crane. She's hiding something. And I begin to suspect it is the key to this entire affair. Chapter 3. The Fellow's Secrets. Morning came grey and damp. A fine mist hanging over Cambridge that seemed to press the ancient spires closer to earth. I slept poorly, my dreams troubled by images of falling bodies and clock towers striking midnight, and rose before 7 to find Poirot already dressed and examining his notes by the window. You have been awake long, Poirot? I have not slept at all, mon ami. He did not look up from his papers. The little grey cells, they do not rest when a puzzle demands their attention. I have been considering the question of keys. Keys? 5 fellows with keys to the clock tower were present in college last night. 6, if we count the victim. Yet the porter's log shows no one signed out a tower key after 10 o'clock, when the door was locked. He tapped his finger against the window frame. This means either the killer used their own key, which would be most incriminating, or what? Or they had a duplicate made. Poirot turned to face me. The original keys are old, Hastings. Victorian, I should think. A competent locksmith could produce a copy easily enough. The question is, who would have had the opportunity? Anyone who possessed a key long enough to have it copied. Précisément. And according to college records, keys are occasionally lost and replaced. A lost key, reported and returned later. This would provide the opportunity without arousing suspicion. He gathered his notes. But come, we have interviews to conduct before Inspector Graves monopolizes our witnesses. We found Professor Harold Finch in his rooms, a cramped study overflowing with papers and the detritus of decades of academic hoarding. The elderly Don looked as though he had aged 10 years overnight, his hands trembling as he poured us tea with excruciating care. Terrible business, he muttered, spilling milk across the tray. Terrible. Never thought I'd see such a thing at St. Ambrose's. We're scholars, gentlemen, not murderers. And yet someone is, Poirot observed mildly. Professor Finch, I understand you had financial dealings with the deceased. Finch's cup rattled against its saucer. I don't know what you mean. Come now. It is widely known that you owed Professor Ashworth money. Gambling debts, I believe. The old man's face crumpled. It's true. God help me, it's true. I've always had a weakness for cards. Ashworth found out. He always found out everything, and offered to cover my debts. I was a fool to accept. And the terms of this arrangement? He owned me. Finch's voice was bitter. Every vote in the senior common room, every committee decision, I voted as Edmund directed. If I refused, he threatened to expose me. I would have lost my fellowship, my pension, everything. A powerful motive for murder, I observed. Murder? Finch looked genuinely horrified. I couldn't murder anyone. I haven't the nerve. And besides, I was in my rooms all evening after dinner. Ask the porter. I requested hot milk at 11. Hartley brought it himself. Poirot made a note. The porter confirmed you were in your rooms at 11. He saw me in my dressing gown. I suffer from insomnia, you see. The hot milk helps. And between 11 and midnight, I was reading. Alone. Finch's hands trembled more violently. I know how that sounds, but I swear to you, I never left my rooms. Poirot regarded him thoughtfully. Tell me, Professor, what do you know of Professor Ashworth's activities during the Great War? The change in Finch was remarkable. His trembling stopped. His face went carefully blank. The war? Edmund was here in Cambridge, I believe. Reserved occupation. Important academic work. Why do you ask? Mere curiosity. Poirot rose. Thank you for your time, Professor. Please do not leave Cambridge without informing Inspector Graves. As we descended the staircase, Poirot was silent. Finally he spoke. He knows something, Hastings. The moment I mentioned the war, his fear transformed into caution. Professor Finch is protecting someone. Or something. We found Dr. Marcus Webb in the college library, surrounded by medieval manuscripts that he was manifestly not reading. His handsome face was haggard, dark circles under his eyes betraying a sleepless night. I suppose you've come to accuse me, he said without preamble. Everyone else has. I accuse no one, Dr. Webb. I seek only truth. Poirot settled into a chair opposite him. Your public threat against Professor Ashworth. You regret it now, I imagine. Webb laughed bitterly. Regret? I regret saying it aloud where people could hear. I don't regret the sentiment. He met Poirot's gaze defiantly. Ashworth was a monster. He blocked my fellowship 3 times. 3 times, Monsieur Poirot. I've been a lecturer for 12 years, publishing work that's been cited throughout Europe, and I'm still Dr. Webb. While lesser men become professors because they flatter the right people, that must have been deeply frustrating. Frustrating? Webb's voice rose. He was destroying my career, my life's work. And for what? Because I dared to criticize his methodology in a paper 10 years ago. 10 years, and he never forgave me. Where were you at midnight, Dr. Webb? Something flickered in his eyes. In my rooms. Alone. You can prove this? A long pause. No. Poirot leaned forward. Dr. Webb, I am going to ask you a direct question, and I advise you to answer honestly. Were you in your rooms alone, or were you with someone whose identity you wish to protect? Webb's composure cracked. He glanced around the library, confirming we were alone, then spoke in a low, urgent voice. I was with someone. A woman. But I can't tell you who. It would destroy her reputation. Her reputation or her marriage? Webb said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Dr. Webb, if your alibi depends upon this woman's testimony, you would be wise to reconsider your gallantry. A murder charge is rather more serious than a scandal. I know. Webb's voice was anguished. But I can't. I won't. She trusted me. Poirot rose. Very well. But consider this, Dr. Webb. If you did not kill Professor Ashworth, then someone else did. And that someone may be quite content to let suspicion fall upon you while they escape justice. Lady Catherine Blackwood received us in the Master's Lodge, a gracious Georgian building overlooking the college gardens. She was impeccably dressed, her silver blonde hair perfectly arranged, but her eyes held a wariness that suggested our visit was not unexpected. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she gestured to chairs. My husband is with the police, giving his statement. I'm afraid I can't tell you much about last night. I retired early with a headache. After the dinner? Immediately after. Edmund's little performance quite ruined my appetite. Her lip curled with distaste. The man was insufferable. You disliked him. Everyone disliked him, Monsieur Poirot. I was merely honest enough not to hide it. And the source of your particular animosity? Lady Blackwood's eyes narrowed. What has my husband told you? Nothing. I ask only what I observe. Your reaction to Professor Ashworth last evening was notably hostile, more so than a general dislike would explain. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke, her voice low and controlled. Edmund Ashworth made advances toward me 3 years ago. When I refused him, he threatened to tell my husband that I had encouraged him. It was a lie, of course, but Edmund was persuasive, and my husband... She paused. My husband is not always as confident of my affection as he should be. Did he make good on this threat? He held it over me, used it to ensure my silence when he bullied other fellows, to guarantee my support in social situations. Her composure cracked slightly. I was his puppet, Monsieur Poirot. We all were. And now the puppet master is dead. Yes. Her eyes met mine, cool and steady. And I cannot pretend I'm sorry. Poirot rose to leave, then paused at the door. Lady Blackwood, one final question. Were you alone all evening after you retired? Something shifted in her expression. A flicker of alarm, quickly suppressed. Of course. My husband can confirm I was in our chambers when he retired at 11:30. And before 11:30, I was resting, alone. But she did not meet his eyes as she said it. We walked through the misty gardens. Poirot deep in thought. She's lying, Hastings, as is Dr. Webb, and unless I am much mistaken, they are lying about the same thing. You think they were together? The possibility presents itself. Dr. Webb claims to have been with a woman whose identity he must protect. Lady Blackwood claims to have been alone, but cannot meet my eyes when she says so. And both have powerful reasons to wish Ashworth dead. He threatened her with scandal, and he destroyed Webb's career. Could they have conspired together? Murdered him jointly? Poirot shook his head slowly. It is possible, but I think not. Their affair, if affair it is, provides alibi, not motive for conspiracy. No, mon ami. I believe they were otherwise engaged while someone else committed murder. Then who? That, Hastings, is what we must determine. He paused beneath the ancient oak, its leaves beginning to turn gold. We have interviewed the obvious suspects. Now we must seek out those who are not obvious. Come, let us visit Mr. Hartley, the night porter. The servants, They see much that others miss. Thomas Hartley occupied a small lodge by the main gate, a cozy space warmed by a coal fire. He was a solid man in his 60s, with the weathered face of someone who had spent years outdoors before finding his current position. He greeted us with respectful wariness. "Terrible thing, sirs. Terrible. I've been porter here 23 years, and nothing like this has ever happened." "You were on duty last night, Mr. Hartley." "All night, sir. 10 in the evening until 6 this morning." "And you locked the clock tower door at 10 o'clock?" "As always, sir. College regulation." "Did you see anyone approach the tower after that time?" Hartley hesitated. "I was at my post most of the night, sir, but I did make rounds, checking doors, windows, that sort of thing. And I took hot milk to Professor Finch at 11. So there were periods when you were not at the gate." "Yes, sir. Perhaps 20 minutes at a time, here and there." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And Dr. Crane, you saw her discover the body?" "I heard her scream, sir. Came running from my lodge. She was standing there, white as a sheet, staring down at..." He shuddered. "Well, you saw. Had you seen Dr. Crane earlier in the evening?" Another hesitation, longer this time. She came through the gate around 11:30, sir, returning from somewhere." I caught my breath. "Returning? She had left the college?" "For an hour or so, sir. Left around 10:30, came back at 11:30. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And where had she been?" "I didn't ask, sir. Not my place. But..." Hartley lowered his voice. "She were carrying something when she came back. Small package wrapped in paper. She put it in her pocket, quick-like, when she saw me." "Did you mention this to the police?" "They didn't ask, sir. They only wanted to know about the tower and who had keys." Poirot was silent for a moment. Then, "Mr. Hartley, has anyone reported losing a clock tower key recently? In the past months, perhaps?" Hartley's expression shifted. Surprise, followed by something like recognition. "Now that you mention it, sir, Dr. Crane reported her key missing about 3 weeks ago. We issued her a replacement. And the original? She brought it back 2 days later. Said she'd found it in her rooms, after all. I put it in the safe with the others." He frowned. "Is that important, sir?" "Perhaps," Poirot murmured. "Perhaps." We walked back toward our guest rooms, the mist thickening around us. Dr. Crane, Hastings. Always it comes back to Dr. Crane. She left the college on the night of the murder. She returned carrying something she wished to hide. And 3 weeks ago, she lost her clock tower key, long enough to have a duplicate made. "You think she's the murderer?" "I think she is at the center of this mystery." Poirot paused, gazing up at the clock tower, its face ghostly in the fog. "But there are still pieces missing. The blackmail note spoke of France, 1917. Dr. Crane served as a nurse in France during those years, and she denies knowing Ashworth. A lie, I am certain. What happened in France? That, mon ami, is the question we must answer. And I believe I know where to find the answer." His eyes glittered. "The War Office keeps records, medical records, discharge papers. If Professor Ashworth had some secret worth killing for, it will be found there." He straightened his coat, brushing an invisible speck from his lapel. "Tomorrow, Hastings, we go to London. The past, it holds the key to this present murder, and Hercule Poirot intends to unlock it." Chapter 34. The Manuscript and the Grudge. Our journey to London was delayed by Inspector Graves, who appeared at our rooms shortly after breakfast, with a warrant to search the deceased's study and a request, phrased as something closer to a demand, that Poirot accompany him. "Professional courtesy," Graves said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "You've been poking about, asking questions. Figured you might as well see what we find." Professor Ashworth's rooms occupied the best position in college, a spacious suite overlooking Great Court with the clock tower framed perfectly in the central window. The irony was not lost on me. The man had spent decades gazing at the monument that bore his family's name, never imagining it would become the instrument of his death. The study itself was immaculate, almost obsessively so. Books arranged by height and colour, papers stacked with geometric precision, not a speck of dust on any surface. A man of order, Poirot observed, running a finger along a shelf. Everything in its place. Control. It was important to him. Control over everything and everyone, Graves muttered, rifling through a desk drawer. Half the college wanted him dead. I've never seen so many people fail to pretend grief. I wandered to the window while they searched, gazing down at the court below. Students hurried between buildings, their academic gowns flapping in the autumn wind, apparently unconcerned that a murder had occurred mere hours before. Youth, I reflected, had a remarkable capacity for carrying on. Monsieur Poirot. Graves's voice was sharp. You'll want to see this. He had opened a locked drawer in the desk, forced it judging by the splintered wood, and extracted a leather folder thick with papers. As Poirot examined the contents, his expression grew increasingly grave. What is it? I asked. Documents, Hastings. Financial documents. Poirot spread several pages across the desk. Bank statements, investment records, and these... He held up a sheaf of handwritten notes. Personal accounts of various fellows, detailing their debts, their indiscretions, their secrets. Blackmail material, Graves said flatly. Précisément. Professor Ashworth. He kept detailed records of every lever he held over his colleagues. Professor Finch's gambling debts. Here, documented to the penny. Lady Blackwood's alleged indiscretion. Here, with dates and witnesses he claimed would testify. Dr. Webb's professional failures. Here, with copies of the rejection letters Ashworth himself arranged. I felt sick. The man was a spider, sitting at the centre of a web. An apt metaphor, mon ami. But observe. Poirot extracted another document, this one older, its paper yellowed with age. This does not fit the pattern. Was a letter, handwritten, dated March 1917. The handwriting was feminine, elegant but hurried, and it was addressed not to Ashworth but to someone called Lieutenant E. Crawford. Poirot read aloud. Dearest Edmund, I write in haste. The arrangements are made. Dr. Morrison has agreed to provide the necessary documentation, and your transfer to the convalescent home in Surrey will be processed within the week. No one need ever know the true nature of your condition. Your reputation, your family's honour, all will be preserved. But you must destroy this letter, and any evidence of our correspondence. If the truth were to emerge, we would both be ruined. Ever yours, Atch. Lieutenant E. Crawford, I repeated, but Ashworth's first name was Edmund. Could Crawford have been an alias? It would explain much. Poirot's eyes glittered. A man of military age who spent the war in Cambridge, claiming reserved occupation. But what if that was a lie? What if Edmund Ashworth served under another name, and suffered some disgrace that required concealment? The letter mentions the true nature of your condition, Graves observed. Sounds medical. Shell shock, perhaps. Or cowardice. Poirot's voice was soft. In 1917, the British Army was not kind to men who broke under pressure. A mental collapse, a refusal to fight. Such things could destroy a man's reputation utterly, especially a man from a prominent family. He turned the letter over, examining it carefully. The initial H, the feminine hand. A woman who knew Ashworth intimately, who helped him conceal his shame. His expression sharpened. And who had access to Dr. Morrison, a name that appears among the current fellows of this college? Professor Morrison? I recalled the name from Graves's list. He's in London, isn't he? Supposedly attending a conference. Graves made a note. I'll have him brought in for questioning. But Poirot was already moving on, his attention caught by another document in the folder. A manuscript, perhaps 50 pages, bound with string and bearing no title. What is this? He began to read, his brow furrowing. I peered over his shoulder. The manuscript appeared to be an academic paper, densely written, concerning some aspect of Roman military history. The handwriting was not Ashworth's. It was smaller, more precise, with distinctive loops on the capital letters. Hastings. Poirot's voice was strange. Look at the final page. I looked. The last paragraph had been crossed out violently, the pen strokes tearing through the paper. Beneath the deletion, in a different hand, Ashworth's, I presumed, was written a single word. Mine. He stole someone's research, I breathed. Not merely stole, mon ami, claimed it as his own. This manuscript, it represents years of work. Whoever wrote it would have built their career upon its publication. Poirot examined the handwriting more closely. The loops, the precision. I have seen this hand before, recently. Where? In Dr. Crane's rooms, the notes on her desk, when we passed her door this morning. His eyes met mine. This manuscript, Hastings, it belongs to Dr. Helena Crane. We found Dr. Crane in the college library, surrounded by archaeological texts that she was clearly not reading. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed, but her composure remained intact. Monsieur Poirot, I wondered when you would seek me out again. You know why I am here, mademoiselle? I can guess. She closed her book with careful precision. You found the manuscript. Poirot produced the bound pages from his coat. Your work, I believe. Research that would have established your reputation. Had Professor Ashworth not claimed it as his own? Dr. Crane's jaw tightened, but she did not deny it. 3 years of work. 3 years of excavation, translation, analysis. I trusted him, Monsieur Poirot. He was my mentor, my sponsor in this college. I gave him my manuscript to review, to offer suggestions for improvement. Her voice grew bitter. He published it under his own name 6 months later, changed a few sentences, added some footnotes. But the core research, my research, became his triumph. You did not protest? To whom? He controlled the journals, the review committees, the academic societies. His word against mine, a junior woman fellow against a distinguished professor with a family name that opened every door. She laughed. A hollow sound. I tried, Monsieur Poirot. I submitted a complaint to the college. It was dismissed. I wrote to the journals. My letters were ignored. Ashworth made certain that anyone who supported me would share my fate. And so you were silenced. Worse than silenced. He began systematically destroying what remained of my career, blocking my publications, spreading rumors about my competence, ensuring that no other institution would hire me. Her eyes burned with cold fury. He took everything I had built and left me with nothing but the privilege of watching him enjoy the fruits of my labor. I felt a chill despite the library's warmth. Here was motive, powerful, personal, devastating. Dr. Crane had every reason to want Ashworth dead. Mademoiselle, Poirot said quietly, where did you go on the night of the murder? Between 10:30 and 11:30? Her composure flickered. The porter told you. He observed your departure and return. He noted the package you carried. For a long moment, Dr. Crane said nothing. Then she reached into her bag and produced a small wrapped bundle, which she set on the table between us. Open it. Poirot unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a small bronze statuette, Roman by the look of it, depicting a soldier in classical armor. A forgery, Dr. Crane explained. I've been investigating a ring of antiquities forgers operating in Cambridge. That night, I met an informant who provided me with this sample. He insisted on secrecy, hence the late hour and the hidden package. This informant, he can verify your story? His name is Michael Townsend. He works at the Fitzwilliam Museum. He'll confirm we met that evening. She met Poirot's gaze steadily. I had nothing to do with Ashworth's death, Monsieur Poirot. I hated him, yes. I dreamed of his downfall, but I did not kill him. And the tower key? The one you reported lost 3 weeks ago? Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, or fear. How did you know about that? The porter maintains records. You reported the key missing, then returned it 2 days later, claiming to have found it. Because I did find it. It had fallen behind my desk. But her voice lacked conviction, and her eyes slid away from Poirot's. Mademoiselle, I ask you again, the truth, please. Where was the key during those 2 days? The silence stretched. When Dr. Crane finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know. You don't know? I lost it. Genuinely lost it. I searched everywhere. Then it reappeared on my desk 2 days later, as if it had never been gone. She looked up, and I saw something unexpected in her eyes. Not guilt, but fear. Someone took my key, Monsieur Poirot. Someone borrowed it and returned it without my knowledge. And now I am terrified that I know who and why. Tell me. She shook her head. I have no proof. Only suspicion. And if I'm wrong... She swallowed. I need to speak with someone first. Tonight. Then I will tell you everything. Mademoiselle, if you have information... Tomorrow, Monsieur Poirot. I promise. Give me until tomorrow. Poirot studied her for a long moment. Very well. But I urge you to take care, mademoiselle. A murderer is at large in this college, and you may know more than is safe. We left the library as the afternoon shadows lengthened, the mist creeping back across the lawns. You believe her? I asked. I believe she's frightened, Poirot replied. Genuinely frightened. The question is, of whom? She suspects someone. Someone close to her. Oui. And that suspicion terrifies her. He paused, gazing up at the clock tower. The key, Hastings. Someone borrowed Dr. Crane's key, had a duplicate made, and returned the original. This person knew her routine, had access to her rooms. A colleague, a friend, someone she trusted. Could it be a trap? Could she be the murderer, spinning a tale to deflect suspicion? It is possible, but Poirot's tone was doubtful. Yet her fear was genuine. I have seen many liars, Hastings. Dr. Crane is hiding something, yes, but I do not think she is hiding murder. Then what is she hiding? The connection to 1917. His eyes glittered. The letter we found mentioned a woman whose initial was H. Dr. Crane's first name is Helena. She served as a nurse in France during those years, and she claims not to have known Ashworth. A lie, I am certain. You think she was the H from the letter? I think she knows what happened to Edmund Ashworth in France. I think she has known for 12 years, and I think that knowledge is the key to this entire affair. He turned toward our rooms, his stride quickening. Tomorrow, we visit the War Office, Hastings. Tonight, we wait and watch. Dr. Crane promised to speak with someone. We must ensure that conversation does not prove fatal. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Great War. The evening passed uneasily. Poirot stationed himself by the window of our guest rooms, his silhouette motionless against the darkening sky, watching the comings and goings across Great Court. I attempted to read, but found my attention wandering constantly to the clock tower, its illuminated face marking the slow passage of hours. At 9:30, we observed Dr. Crane emerge from her staircase and cross the court toward the master's lodge. She walked quickly, her coat pulled tight against the evening chill, and disappeared through the lodge's side entrance. The master's lodge, I murmured. She's going to see Sir Reginald? Or Lady Blackwood? Poirot's voice was thoughtful. We shall see who emerges first. We waited. The clock struck 10, then 11:30. At 11:15, Dr. Crane reappeared, walking slowly now, her head bowed. Even from our window, I could see the slump of her shoulders, the weight of some burden pressing down upon her. She returned to her rooms. The light in her window flickered on, then off again within minutes. She has learned something, Poirot said. Something that troubles her deeply. Should we speak with her tonight? No. Tomorrow she has promised to tell us everything. Tonight, we give her space to compose her thoughts. He turned from the window. But I think, Hastings, that we should take precautions. The porter, Hartley, he is trustworthy, I believe. I shall ask him to keep particular watch on Dr. Crane's staircase tonight. I slept poorly again, my dreams troubled by shadowed figures and ticking clocks. But the night passed without incident, and morning came grey and quiet, the mist thicker than before. We took the 10 o'clock train to London, leaving Inspector Graves to continue his interviews. Poirot had sent a telegram ahead, and we were met at Liverpool Street by a young clerk from the War Office who escorted us through labyrinthine corridors to a small, dusty archive room. "The records you requested, sir." The clerk indicated several boxes stacked on a central table. "Medical discharges from the Western Front, 1916-1918, sorted by regiment and date." "I am looking for a specific case," Poirot explained. "A Lieutenant E. Crawford, possibly attached to the Royal Berkshire Regiment. Medical discharge, likely early 1917. The clerk's eyebrows rose. "Crawford? That's not a common name. Let me see." He disappeared among the shelves, returning after several minutes with a slim folder. "Lieutenant Edmund Crawford, Royal Berkshire Regiment. Admitted to number 7 Casualty Clearing Station, February 1917. Discharged from service, March 1917. He handed the folder to Poirot. "Medical, grounds." Poirot opened the folder, and I read over his shoulder. The documents within painted a damning picture. Lieutenant Edmund Crawford, the photograph confirmed it was indeed a younger Edmund Ashworth, had suffered a complete nervous collapse during the Battle of Arras. The medical report, written in clinical language, described acute neurasthenia and functional paralysis of the lower limbs, terms I recognized from my own wartime service as euphemisms for shell shock and psychological breakdown. But it was the secondary report that proved most revealing. Patient exhibits extreme agitation when questioned about events of 14th of February 1917. Claims to have witnessed the death of Sergeant William Hartley during a German bombardment. However, eyewitness accounts suggest patient fled his position prior to the bombardment, abandoning Sergeant Hartley and 3 other men to their fate. Patient has since developed hysterical blindness and paralysis, apparently as psychological defense against guilt. "He ran," I breathed. "He abandoned his men." "We." Poirot's voice was grave. "Lieutenant Crawford, Edmund Ashworth, was a coward. When the shells began to fall, he fled his post. 4 men died because of his desertion. But he wasn't court-martialed?" Poirot turned to the final pages. "Because of this." It was a letter from a Dr. Alistair Morrison, the same Morrison who was now a fellow at St. Ambrose's, certifying that Lieutenant Crawford suffered from a pre-existing medical condition that had been exacerbated by combat stress. The letter recommended immediate discharge on medical grounds, with no mention of the circumstances surrounding the breakdown. "Dr. Morrison covered it up," I said. "Covered it up, and was rewarded for his trouble. When the war ended, Ashworth returned to Cambridge and ensured that Dr. Morrison received a fellowship at St. Ambrose's, a comfortable position for a man who knew too much. Blackmail in reverse. Mutually assured destruction Hastings. Morrison knew Ashworth's secret. Ashworth knew Morrison had falsified medical records. Neither could expose the other without destroying themselves." Poirot closed the folder thoughtfully. "But there is more. The treating nurse at the casualty clearing station. Let us see." He flipped back through the papers, searching for the nursing records. When he found them, his expression sharpened. "Hastings, look at this signature." I looked. The nurse who had overseen Lieutenant Crawford's care, who had witnessed his breakdown and heard his confessions of cowardice, had signed her reports with a neat, familiar hand. Nurse Helena Crane. The train journey back to Cambridge seemed interminable. Poirot sat in silence, his grey cells working furiously, while I struggled to piece together what we had learned. "So Dr. Crane knew," I said at last. "She knew what Ashworth had done during the war. She treated him, heard his confession. She was the H from the letter." "We," She helped him conceal his shame, working with Dr. Morrison to arrange his discharge and protect his reputation. But why? If she knew he was a coward, why help him? Poirot's expression was troubled. That is the question, is it not? Why would a young nurse risk her own position to protect a disgraced officer? Love? I suggested. Perhaps she was in love with him. Perhaps. Or perhaps there is another explanation, one we have not yet considered. He gazed out at the passing countryside, the flat fenlands stretching grey and misty toward the horizon. The sergeant who died, Hastings. The one Ashworth abandoned. His name was William Hartley. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Hartley, like the porter. Precisely like the porter. Poirot's eyes glittered. Thomas Hartley, night porter of St. Ambrose's College for 23 years. A man who served in the war, if I am not mistaken. A man who would be approximately the right age to be the brother or son of Sergeant William Hartley. Good God! If Thomas Hartley is related to the man Ashworth abandoned to die, then we have another motive for murder. One far more powerful than academic rivalry or stolen manuscripts. But Hartley doesn't have a key to the tower. No. But he has something equally valuable. Access. He knows everyone's movements. He knows when the fellows come and go, when the court is empty, when the tower is unguarded. Poirot leaned forward. And he is the one who told us about Dr. Crane's midnight walk. Perhaps he told us because it was true. Or perhaps he told us to deflect suspicion from himself. We arrived back in Cambridge shortly after 4 o'clock. The mist had thickened to fog, the college spires emerging like ghosts from the grey murk. As our taxi approached the gates of St. Ambrose's, I noticed a small crowd gathered in Great Court. Something has happened, Poirot said sharply. We hurried through the gate to find Inspector Graves standing before the clock tower, his face grim. Several constables were cordoning off the area, and I caught a glimpse of white-coated medical personnel entering the tower's base. Monsieur Poirot, Graves' voice was flat. You've heard then? Heard what? We have just arrived from London. There's been another death. Graves stepped aside, allowing us to see through the tower doorway. Dr. Helena Crane, found this morning at the base of the tower stairs. Neck broken. The world seemed to tilt. I gripped Poirot's arm for support. No, Poirot whispered. Non, non, non. This cannot be. Same method as Ashworth, I managed. Different. Graves led us through the doorway to where Dr. Crane's body lay crumpled at the foot of the spiral staircase. She fell inside the tower, not from the observation gallery. Looks like she missed her footing on the stairs and tumbled. An accident? That's what someone wants us to think. Graves pointed to a dark stain on the third step. See that? Oil. Fresh oil. Applied to the stone. Someone made these stairs a death trap. Poirot knelt beside the body, his face grey with grief and guilt. She came to me, Hastings. She told me she suspected someone. She promised to reveal everything today. And I let her go. I thought one more night would not matter. You couldn't have known, I said. I should have known. His voice was bitter. She was frightened. Genuinely frightened. And I sent her away to face her fear alone. He studied the body with clinical precision, though I could see the effort it cost him. Dr. Crane's face was peaceful in death, her expression almost resigned, as if she had known in the end what was coming. Her hands, Poirot murmured. Look at her hands, Hastings. I looked. Her right hand was clenched tight, the fingers curled around something hidden in her palm. Inspector, with your permission? Poirot carefully pried open the dead woman's fingers. Inside was a small brass object, dulled with age, a key, a clock tower key. But she already had a key, Graves said, puzzled. We found it in her room. Then this is another key. Poirot turned it over in his fingers. The duplicate, perhaps. The one she claimed someone had made without her knowledge. Why would she be holding it? Because she knew who had made it. Poirot rose, his expression hardening. She knew, and she came here to confront them, but they were waiting for her. He examined the stairs, the oil stain, the angle of the body. She entered the tower at night. After midnight, I would guess, when the court was empty. She climbed the stairs, perhaps intending to meet her suspect at the observation gallery. But the stairs had been prepared. The oil, it caused her to slip. She fell backward, struck her head, and died. Premeditated murder, I said. We, made to look like an accident. Poirot's voice was cold. The killer knew she was coming. They prepared the trap and waited for her to walk into it. How did they know? Poirot's eyes swept the court, settling on the master's lodge. Last night, Dr. Crane visited someone in the lodge. She was there for nearly an hour. When she emerged, she was troubled, burdened, as if she had learned something terrible. His gaze hardened. We must discover who she met and what was said. Because I believe Hastings, that conversation sealed her fate. He turned to Inspector Graves. Inspector, I must ask that you prevent anyone from leaving the college. The murderer is among us, someone who killed twice to protect a secret from 1917, and I intend to unmask them before another innocent life is lost. Chapter 6. The Little Grey Cells. The fog pressed close around the college as evening fell, transforming the ancient buildings into looming shadows. Poirot had commandeered Dr. Cavendish's study for our investigation, and there we sat now, the fire crackling low, while he arranged his notes with meticulous precision. I had rarely seen him so affected. The death of Dr. Crane weighed upon him, visibly, not merely as a puzzle to be solved, but as a personal failure. Twice he had spoken with her. Twice she had been on the verge of revealing what she knew. And now she was dead. Her secrets buried with her. We must approach this systematically, Hastings. His voice was quiet but firm. The little grey cells, they must not be clouded by emotion. Dr. Crane deserves justice. That justice requires clarity. Where do we begin? With what we know. He rose and began to pace before the fire. Professor Edmund Ashworth was murdered 2 nights ago, pushed from the Clocktower observation gallery at midnight. He was lured there by a blackmail note referencing events in France, 1917. His cowardice during the war, précisément, Ashworth, then Lieutenant Crawford, abandoned his men during a German bombardment. 4 soldiers died, including Sergeant William Hartley. The disgrace was covered up by Dr. Morrison, with the assistance of nurse Helena Crane, who is now also dead. Poirot's expression darkened. Dr. Crane was murdered last night, pushed down the tower stairs after they had been coated with oil. She was clutching a duplicate key, the key that allowed the murderer access to the tower. A key she had discovered was missing from her possession 3 weeks ago. Exactly. Someone borrowed Dr. Crane's key, had a duplicate made, and returned the original without her knowledge. This person had access to her rooms, knew her routines, and understood that suspicion would fall upon her if the key's disappearance were ever discovered. I frowned. That suggests someone close to her. A colleague. A friend. Or someone who had reason to observe her movements carefully. Poirot paused by the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded court. Consider, Hastings. Who among our suspects had both motive and opportunity? I ticked them off on my fingers. Dr. Webb, blocked from fellowship, publicly threatened Ashworth. But his alibi with Lady Blackwood seems solid, if scandalous. Continue. Professor Finch, gambling debts, controlled by Ashworth. But he's elderly, nervous. I can't imagine him having the nerve to commit murder. And yet desperate men find unexpected reserves of courage. But go on. Lady Blackwood, sexually harassed by Ashworth, held hostage by his threats. She might have wanted him dead, but she was with Webb during the murder. If we believe their account. You doubt it? I doubt everything, Hastings. It is my profession. Poirot resumed his pacing. What of the others? Sir Reginald Blackwood. The master, I considered. He's been rather a non-entity in all this. Genial but ineffective. What motive would he have? His wife's honour, perhaps. Or financial considerations we have not yet uncovered. The college depends upon Ashworth money. With Ashworth dead, that funding may be redirected. And Dr. Morrison. He's been conveniently absent in London. Too conveniently, perhaps. Poirot's eyes glittered. Dr. Morrison falsified medical records in 1917 to protect Ashworth. He has lived under Ashworth's shadow ever since, bound by mutual knowledge of their crime. If Ashworth threatened to expose him, or if Morrison feared such exposure, he would have powerful motive for murder. But Morrison wasn't even in Cambridge on the night of the murder. So we are told. But alibis, Hastings, they can be manufactured. A man might leave London, commit murder, and return before his absence was noted. I shook my head. That seems unnecessarily complicated. Surely the killer is someone who was here, in college, with direct access to the tower. Unless the killer wished us to think precisely that. Poirot turned from the window, his expression intent. But you raise a valid point. Let us focus on those with confirmed presence. That leaves us with Dr. Webb, Professor Finch, Sir Reginald, Lady Blackwood, Dr. Crane, now deceased, and one other. The porter, Thomas Hartley. Thomas Hartley. Poirot's voice grew thoughtful. A man who served in the Great War. A man whose surname matches that of the Sergeant Ashworth abandoned to die. A man who has worked at this college for 23 years, watching Ashworth rise to prominence while knowing, perhaps, what manner of coward he truly was. You think Hartley is related to the dead sergeant? I think it is too great a coincidence to ignore. And I think we must speak with him again, with this knowledge in mind. We found Thomas Hartley in his lodge, sitting alone by the fire with a cup of tea grown cold in his hands. He looked up as we entered, and I was struck by how old he suddenly appeared. Not merely aged, but worn, as if the events of the past days had stripped away some essential vitality. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, his voice was weary. I expected you'd come. You know why we are here, Mr. Hartley? I can guess. He set down his cup with a trembling hand. You've been to London. You've seen the records. Poirot settled into the chair opposite him. Sergeant William Hartley. Your father? The porter nodded slowly. My father. William Thomas Hartley, Royal Berkshire Regiment. Killed in action, February 1917, during a German bombardment at Arras. His jaw tightened. Killed because his commanding officer ran away and left him to die. You knew. I've always known. Hartley's eyes blazed with sudden fire. I was 15 when the telegram came. My mother collapsed. She never recovered. Died within the year, they said, of influenza. But it was grief that killed her. I was left alone, orphaned by a war I was too young to fight in, and a coward who was too craven to face it. How did you discover the truth? Not until years later. I served myself, you know. Joined up in 1918. Saw the last months of the fighting. After the war, I tracked down men from my father's regiment. One of them told me what really happened. His voice shook. Lieutenant Crawford, Ashworth, ordered the men to hold position while he scouted the rear. He never came back. When the shells started falling, there was no one to give the order to retreat. My father and 3 others died in that barrage. And when you learned that Lieutenant Crawford was Professor Edmund Ashworth of St. Ambrose's College, I came here. Hartley's smile was bitter. Took the porter's job. Watched him for 23 years. Watched him strut and preen and destroy other people's lives without a moment's remorse. He never recognized me. Never knew who I was. Just another servant, invisible and beneath his notice. Did you kill him, Mr. Hartley? The question hung in the air. Hartley met Poirot's gaze steadily. No, Monsieur Poirot, I did not. You had motive. You had opportunity. You know this college better than anyone. Every door, every corridor, every hidden corner. I know all that. Hartley's voice was calm. And I won't pretend I didn't dream of killing him. 1,000 times I imagined it. Pushing him from that tower his family's money built. Watching him fall. The way my father fell when the shells came down. He shook his head. But I couldn't do it. Not because I lacked the courage, but because of her. Her? Dr. Crane. Hartley's expression softened. She knew, you see. She knew what Ashworth had done, what he really was. She was there at the clearing station when he was brought in babbling and shaking. She heard his confession. She told you this? 3 years ago, when she first came to St. Ambrose's. She recognized my name, made the connection. She sought me out one evening, told me everything. His voice grew thick. She wept, Monsieur Poirot, wept for my father, whom she had never known, wept for what she had done in helping Ashworth escape justice. Why did she help him? Hartley was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because Dr. Morrison forced her to. He threatened to destroy her nursing career if she didn't cooperate. Said he would claim she had stolen morphine, forged medical records, behaved improperly with patients. She was young, vulnerable, far from home. She did what he demanded. And she has carried that guilt ever since. She wanted to expose Ashworth, wanted to tell the truth at last. But Morrison still held power over her. He had kept evidence of her cooperation in 1917, documents that could ruin her even now. She was trapped, Monsieur Poirot. Trapped by secrets from 12 years ago. Poirot leaned forward. The night before Dr. Crane died, she visited the Master's Lodge. Do you know why? Hartley nodded slowly. She told me she had found something. Something that would expose everything. Ashworth's cowardice, Morrison's cover-up, all of it. She said she needed to confront someone first, to give them a chance to confess before she went to the authorities. Who? She didn't say. But she was frightened, Monsieur Poirot. More frightened than I had ever seen her. And the duplicate key? The one she was clutching when she died? Hartley's face went pale. I don't know anything about that. I swear to you. Poirot studied him for a long moment, his grey eyes unreadable. Then he rose. Thank you, Mr. Hartley. You have been most helpful. Monsieur Poirot? Hartley caught his arm. Find who killed her. Please. She was the only one who ever showed me kindness about my father. She didn't deserve to die. No. Poirot agreed quietly. She did not. We walked back through the fog-shrouded court, the clock tower looming above us like a dark sentinel. Do you believe him? I asked. I believe his grief is genuine. I believe his hatred of Ashworth was real. Poirot paused, gazing up at the tower. But I do not believe he killed either victim. Why not? Because of Dr. Crane. He loved her, Hastings. Perhaps not romantically, but with the fierce devotion of a fellow sufferer. She alone understood his pain, acknowledged his father's sacrifice. He would never harm her. Then who? Poirot was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was strange. The duplicate key, Hastings. It has been troubling me. Someone borrowed Dr. Crane's key, had a copy made, and returned the original. This person had access to her rooms and knew her routines. We've established that. But consider, when did this borrowing occur? 3 weeks ago, according to the porter's records. 3 weeks before Ashworth's murder. His eyes gleamed. This was not an impulsive crime, Hastings. It was planned weeks in advance, with meticulous care. Premeditated murder. Précisément. And who among our suspects has demonstrated such capacity for planning? Who has shown the patience to wait, the discipline to prepare, the intelligence to anticipate every contingency? I thought of the suspects. Webb with his hot temper, Finch with his trembling hands, Lady Blackwood with her cold elegance. I don't know, I admitted. Neither did I. Until this moment, Poirot's expression hardened. But now the little grey cells, they see clearly at last. The breakthrough, Hastings. It has arrived. What breakthrough? Dr. Crane visited the Master's Lodge the night before she died. She went to confront someone with evidence of their crime. That someone betrayed her, knowing she would return to the tower to verify what she had discovered. He turned to face me, his eyes blazing. But she was not the only one who visited the lodge that evening. What do you mean? When we observed from our window, we saw Dr. Crane enter the lodge at 9:30 and leave at 11:15. But we did not watch all night, Hastings. We retired to bed, believing the danger past. You think someone else went to the lodge after we stopped watching? I think someone was already there. Someone who heard Dr. Crane's accusations and realized she had to be silenced. Poirot's voice dropped. Someone who has been invisible throughout this investigation, overlooked because they seem to have no connection to the war, no motive for murder. Who? Tomorrow, Hastings. Tomorrow evening, in the senior common room, I shall gather all the suspects and reveal the truth. His expression was grim. The killer believes themselves safe, protected by fog and confusion. They are mistaken. Hercule Poirot sees clearly now, and justice will be served. Chapter 7. The Gathering in the Senior Common Room. The senior common room of St. Ambrose's College was a handsome chamber, panelled in dark oak and hung with portraits of distinguished former fellows. A fire blazed in the great stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the assembled faces. Faces that watched Hercule Poirot with expressions ranging from apprehension to barely concealed hostility. They were all there, as Poirot had requested. Sir Reginald Blackwood occupied the master's chair, his florid complexion paler than usual, his fingers drumming nervously on the armrest. Beside him sat Lady Catherine Blackwood, elegant in black, her gaze fixed on some point beyond the windows, where fog pressed against the glass. Dr. Marcus Webb stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, his handsome features tight with tension. Professor Harold Finch had claimed a corner seat, his trembling hands wrapped around a glass of brandy he had not touched. And in the doorway, summoned by a telegram that morning, stood Dr. Alistair Morrison, a thin, grey man with spectacles and the haunted look of someone who had spent 30 years waiting for the past to catch up with him. Inspector Graves occupied a chair near the door, notebook ready, 2 constables stationed in the corridor beyond. Thomas Hartley had been permitted to attend at Poirot's request. He stood apart from the others, his weathered face unreadable, his eyes never leaving the empty chair where Dr. Helena Crane should have sat. I took my own position near Poirot, my heart beating faster than I cared to admit. In all our years together, I had witnessed many such gatherings. The theatrical denouement that Poirot so loved, the careful unraveling of threads that had seemed impossibly tangled. But tonight felt different. Tonight, 2 people were dead, and the fog seemed to press against the windows like something living, something hungry. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice carrying easily through the silent room. We are gathered here to unveil a truth that has lain hidden beneath layers of deception, betrayal, and cowardice. The murders of Professor Edmund Ashworth and Dr. Helena Crane were not random acts of violence. They were the final chapters of a tragedy that began 12 years ago, in the mud and blood of the Western Front. He paused, allowing his words to settle. Professor Ashworth was a man who inspired hatred. He bullied colleagues, stole research, destroyed careers, and held this college in a grip of financial control that none dared challenge. It would be easy, too easy, to assume that one of his many victims finally struck back. Dr. Webb, who threatened his life publicly, Professor Finch, who laboured under the weight of gambling debts, Lady Blackwood, who endured his unwanted advances. Webb shifted uncomfortably. Finch's glass trembled. Lady Blackwood's expression did not change. But hatred alone does not make a murderer, Poirot continued. For murder, one requires opportunity, means and a motive powerful enough to overcome the natural human reluctance to take a life. And in this case, the motive was not hatred, but fear. Fear. Sir Reginald spoke for the first time, his voice uncertain. Fear of what? Fear of exposure, Sir Reginald. Fear of a secret so shameful that its revelation would destroy not one life, but several. Poirot's gaze swept the room. The secret of what happened at Arras in February 1917. Dr. Morrison went white. Let me tell you a story, Poirot said. A story of a young officer named Lieutenant Edmund Crawford, the name under which Professor Ashworth served during the Great War. When the German shells began to fall at Arras, Lieutenant Crawford did not lead his men to safety. He fled. He abandoned his post, leaving Sergeant William Hartley and 3 other soldiers to die. Hartley's hands clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. Crawford, Ashworth, suffered a complete breakdown. He was found wandering behind the lines, blind and paralyzed with guilt. He was taken to a casualty clearing station, where he was treated by a young nurse named Helena Crane. Poirot turned to Dr. Morrison, and where he was examined by Dr. Alastair Morrison, who saw an opportunity. Morrison falsified the medical records, transforming cowardice into illness, desertion into honorable discharge. In return, Ashworth promised Morrison a comfortable future, a fellowship at St. Ambrose's, funded by Ashworth money. Morrison's voice was barely a whisper. He gave me no choice. If I refused, he threatened to tell the authorities I had been stealing morphine. A lie, but one that would have ended my career. So you both became prisoners of the secret, Poirot said, bound together by mutual knowledge of each other's crimes. For 12 years, you maintained the fiction. Ashworth, the distinguished professor, Morrison, the respectable fellow, but you were not the only ones who knew. His gaze moved to the empty chair. Nurse Helena Crane also knew. She had heard Ashworth's confession, witnessed his breakdown, signed the falsified reports under Morrison's coercion. She carried that burden for 12 years, watching the man she had helped escape justice rise to prominence while she struggled to build her own career. She was going to expose him, Hartley said quietly. She told me. She couldn't bear it anymore. Dr. Crane had finally decided to tell the truth. But before she could do so, she was killed. Poirot's voice hardened. Silence forever, like Ashworth himself. Sir Reginald leaned forward. Are you saying Morrison killed them both? To protect the secret? It would seem logical, would it not? Poirot tilted his head. Dr. Morrison had the most to lose from exposure. He falsified military records, a serious crime. If Ashworth or Crane revealed the truth, his career, his reputation, his freedom would all be forfeit. Morrison shook his head frantically. I didn't kill anyone. I was in London when Ashworth died. I have witnesses, hotel records, everything. Your alibi has been verified, Poirot acknowledged. You were indeed in London on the night of Ashworth's murder. You could not have pushed him from the clock tower. Then who? Webb demanded. If not Morrison, who killed Ashworth? Poirot smiled, a small cold smile that sent a chill down my spine. Let us examine the evidence. Professor Ashworth received a blackmail note, typed, unsigned, referencing events in France in 1917. He went to the clock tower at midnight, expecting to meet his blackmailer. Instead, he met his killer. He produced the note from his pocket. This note was not written by the killer. It was written by Dr. Helena Crane. A murmur ran through the room. Dr. Crane had decided to confront Ashworth with the truth. She sent this note to lure him to a private meeting, away from witnesses. She intended to give him a choice, confess publicly, or she would expose him herself. But if Crane sent the note, I said, then she knew Ashworth would be at the tower. Surely she didn't kill him. No, Hastings. She did not. But someone else knew about the meeting. Someone who had access to Dr. Crane's rooms, who observed her preparations, who understood what she intended. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Someone who borrowed her clock tower key 3 weeks ago had a duplicate made and returned the original without her knowledge. Who? Sir Reginald's voice was strained. Consider the requirements, Poirot said. The killer needed access to Dr. Crane's rooms. They needed knowledge of her plans. They needed a motive powerful enough to commit murder. Not once, but twice. And they needed to be invisible, overlooked. Someone we would never suspect. He turned to Lady Blackwood. Lady Blackwood, you told me that Professor Ashworth made advances toward you 3 years ago. That when you refused, he threatened to tell your husband you had encouraged him. Yes. Her voice was steady. And you told me you were alone in your chambers on the night of the murder, resting with a headache. Yes. That was a lie. Lady Blackwood's composure flickered, but she said nothing. You were not alone, Lady Blackwood. You were with Dr. Webb. A fact I deduced from the matching inconsistencies in your alibis. You and Dr. Webb have been conducting an affair for some months now, meeting secretly while your husband attends to college business. Sir Reginald made a strangled sound. Webb stepped forward, his face flushed. Leave her out of this, Poirot. If you want to accuse me, I accuse no one yet, Dr. Webb. I merely establish facts. Poirot raised a hand. Your affair with Lady Blackwood provides you both with alibis for Ashworth's murder. You were together in her private sitting room from 11 o'clock until well past midnight. You could not have killed him. Then why mention it at all? Lady Blackwood's voice was ice. Because it explains why neither of you could have committed the crime, and why someone else had the opportunity. Poirot turned to Sir Reginald. Sir Reginald, where were you on the night of the murder? The master blinked. I was in my study, working on college accounts. Until what hour? Late. Past midnight, certainly. Can anyone confirm this? Sir Reginald hesitated. I was alone. Catherine had retired early with her headache, and the servants had been dismissed for the evening. So you have no alibi? Poirot's voice was soft. And you, as Sir Reginald, had access to Dr. Crane's rooms. What? That's absurd. Is it? As master of the college, you possess keys to every building, every chamber. You could enter any fellow's rooms at will. You knew Dr. Crane's routines. You approved her fellowship, reviewed her research, met with her regularly about college matters. That doesn't mean you also knew about your wife's affair with Dr. Webb. The words fell like stones into still water. Sir Reginald went grey. Oh yes, Poirot continued. You knew. You have known for months. I see it in your eyes. The pain, the humiliation, the desperate pretense that nothing was wrong. You suspected, then confirmed, and chose to remain silent because you could not bear the scandal. Reginald? Lady Blackwood reached for her husband's arm, but he pulled away. And Professor Ashworth knew as well, Poirot said. He made it his business to know everyone's secrets. He used that knowledge against your wife, threatening to expose the affair unless she complied with his wishes. How long before he used it against you, Sir Reginald? How long before he demanded your cooperation, your vote on college matters, your support for his schemes, in exchange for his silence? Sir Reginald's face crumpled. He came to me 3 days before he died. Told me he knew about Catherine and Webb. Said he would tell everyone unless I blocked Webb's fellowship permanently and gave him control of the college investments. So you had motive to kill him? Motive, yes, but I didn't do it. Sir Reginald's voice cracked. I'm not capable of... No, Poirot agreed quietly. You are not. You are a weak man, Sir Reginald. Weak, but not wicked. You would endure humiliation rather than risk violence. You are not our murderer. The room fell silent, confusion evident on every face. Then who? Webb demanded. You've eliminated everyone. Not everyone. Poirot's gaze settled on a figure who had been silent throughout, standing in the shadows near the doorway. There is one person I have not yet addressed. One person who has been invisible throughout this investigation, present at every turn, yet never suspected. Professor Harold Finch looked up, his eyes wide with terror. Professor Finch, you have been most cooperative, most helpful. You provided your alibi readily. Hot milk delivered by the porter at 11 o'clock. You trembled and stuttered and played the part of the nervous old man to perfection. I don't understand. But you made one mistake, Professor. One small error that the little grey cells could not ignore. Poirot stepped closer. When I asked you about Professor Ashworth's activities during the war, you knew instantly what I was referring to. You became guarded, careful, because you, too, knew the secret of 1917. Finch shook his head frantically. I knew nothing. I only heard rumours. You knew because you were there. Poirot's voice cut like a blade. Not at Arras, but at the casualty clearing station. You were not always an academic, Professor Finch. Before the war, you served as an orderly at number 7 Casualty Clearing Station, the same station where Lieutenant Crawford was treated. The colour drained from Finch's face. You witnessed everything. You saw Morrison falsify the records. You saw Nurse Crane sign under duress. And you saw an opportunity. Poirot's eyes blazed. When the war ended, you approached Ashworth. You told him what you knew. And he paid for your silence, paid for your education, your fellowship, your entire career. But the payments were not enough. Your gambling debts grew. Ashworth grew tired of your demands. 3 months ago, he threatened to cut you off, to expose your debts and have you dismissed from the college. Poirot's voice dropped. That was when you decided to kill him. Finch's trembling intensified, but his eyes had changed. The fearful old man was fading, replaced by something harder, something desperate. You couldn't use your own clock tower key. It would point directly to you. So you borrowed Dr. Crane's. You knew her routine, knew when she would be away from her rooms. You took the key, had a duplicate made, and returned the original before she noticed. You can't prove any of this. Can I not? Poirot produced a small brass object from his pocket. The duplicate key found clutched in Dr. Crane's hand. This key was made by Hendricks and Sons, the only locksmith in Cambridge capable of duplicating the Victorian design. Their records show that a key matching this description was ordered 3 weeks ago, by a man matching your description, Professor Finch. Finch's composure cracked. They're lying. Someone impersonated me. On the night of the murder, you requested hot milk at 11 o'clock, establishing your alibi with the porter. But you had already left your rooms through the window, climbed down the ancient ivy that covers your staircase, and made your way to the clock tower. Impossible! The porter saw me in my dressing gown. He saw you briefly, through a doorway. He did not enter your rooms. He did not confirm you remained there. Poirot's voice hardened. You waited at the tower for Ashworth to arrive. When he did, you confronted him. Not as a blackmailer, but as an executioner. You pushed him from the gallery and returned to your rooms before the body was discovered. No! But Dr. Crane suspected. She had noticed her key's disappearance. She had observed your behavior in the days before the murder. She began to investigate, and 2 days ago, she found proof. The locksmith's receipt, discarded in your wastepaper basket. I remember Dr. Crane's visit to the master's lodge, her troubled expression when she emerged. She came to the lodge that night, not to confront Sir Reginald, but to warn him. She told him what she had discovered and asked his advice on how to proceed. But you, Professor Finch, you were already there. Finch's face contorted. She shouldn't have interfered. None of this was her concern. She was leaving the lodge when you intercepted her. You convinced her to meet you at the tower, to discuss the situation privately. And when she arrived, she was going to ruin everything. Finch's voice rose to a shriek. 12 years I kept the secret. 12 years I protected Ashworth, and what did I get? Threats, humiliation. He treated me like a servant, like dirt beneath his shoes. The room had gone deadly still. I didn't mean to kill him. Finch's voice dropped, suddenly plaintive. I only want to talk, to make him understand that I deserve better. But he laughed at me, called me a parasite, a worthless fool, said he would expose my debts and have me thrown out of Cambridge without a penny. And so you pushed him. He deserved it. Finch's eyes were wild now, all pretense abandoned. After everything I did for him, the silence, the loyalty, the years of servitude, he deserved to fall. And Dr. Crane, did she deserve to fall as well? Finch's face twisted. She wouldn't listen. I tried to explain, tried to make her understand that it was justice, not murder. But she kept saying she had to tell the police. She left me no choice. There is always a choice, Professor Finch. Poirot's voice was cold. You chose to kill twice rather than face the consequences of your actions. That was not justice. It was cowardice. The same cowardice you once witnessed in Edmund Ashworth. Finch lunged. It happened so quickly that I barely had time to react. The old man's frail appearance had concealed a desperate strength, and he threw himself at Poirot with murder in his eyes. But Inspector Graves was faster. The constables burst through the door, and within moments, Finch was restrained. His wrists cuffed, his struggles futile against younger and stronger arms. Harold Finch, Graves announced, I am arresting you for the murders of Edmund Ashworth and Helena Crane. You are not obliged to say anything, but anything you do say. Finch's screams echoed through the senior common room as they dragged him away, a torrent of accusations and justifications that faded slowly into the fog-shrouded night. The aftermath was quiet, subdued. Sir Reginald sat slumped in his chair, Lady Blackwood beside him, their hands not quite touching. Webb had retreated to the window, his face unreadable. Morrison stood alone, grey and diminished, awaiting whatever judgment would fall upon him for his role in the long-ago cover-up. Thomas Hartley approached Poirot, his weathered face etched with grief. She deserved better, he said quietly. Dr. Crane. She tried to do the right thing, and it killed her. She was brave, Mr. Hartley. She carried a burden for 12 years, and finally found the courage to set it down. Poirot placed a hand on the porter's shoulder. Your father would have been proud to know such a woman. Hartley nodded, unable to speak, and walked slowly out into the fog. I joined Poirot by the fire, where he stood gazing into the dying flames. You knew, I said. You knew it was Finch. I suspected from the moment I learned about the Clocktower key. The killer needed access to Dr. Crane's rooms, knowledge of her plans, and a connection to the secret of 1917. Finch possessed all three, but he was so skilled at appearing harmless that I nearly overlooked him. The trembling, the nervousness, it was all an act? Not entirely. Finch was genuinely afraid of discovery, afraid of consequences. But he channeled that fear into a performance of weakness that fooled us all. Poirot shook his head. The most dangerous criminals, Hastings, are those who hide in plain sight. They make themselves invisible, unremarkable, forgettable. And when they strike, no one thinks to look in their direction. What will happen to Morrison? That is for the authorities to decide. His crime was committed long ago, under duress, but it was a crime nonetheless. The falsification of military records, the protection of a coward at the expense of justice, these are serious matters. And the Blackwoods, Webb, their sins are smaller. Adultery, deception, the weakness of human hearts, they will have to find their own path forward. Poirot straightened his immaculate tie. Justice, Hastings, is not always neat. Sometimes the guilty escape, and the innocent suffer. But tonight, at least, the truth has been told. Helena Crane's courage has been vindicated, and her killer will face the consequences of his actions. We walked out into the foggy night, the clock tower looming above us, its face glowing pale in the mist. As we crossed Great Court, the great clock began to chime. 12 solemn notes, marking midnight. The same hour Ashworth died, I observed. We? Poirot paused, gazing up at the tower. The clock. It continues to mark the hours, indifferent to the dramas that unfold beneath it. Time moves forward, Hastings. The dead remain dead. But truth endures. And that, perhaps, is the only justice we can offer them. He turned toward the gatehouse, his small figure disappearing into the fog. Come, mon ami, our work here is finished. Let us leave Cambridge to its ghosts. I followed, the clock tower's final chime fading into silence behind us. And so concludes our tale of secrets and shadows, of cowardice old and new, of justice delayed but not denied. Hercule Poirot proved once again that no murderer, however cunning, can escape the relentless pursuit of truth. Thank you for joining us tonight at Midnight Mysteries. We hope you enjoyed the Clocktower Murder. Tell us in the comments, did you solve the mystery before Poirot revealed the killer? Until next time, may your own mysteries be small ones, and may truth always light your way through the fog. Bonne nuit, mes amis.